Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Top 10 players for this Florida Gators program heading into the 2024 season. And this list was extremely difficult to come up with, and I think it's going to be very controversial to a lot of Florida Gator fans. There are about 30 players that you could make a strong argument will be top 10 players for this Florida Gators program. And I think that really speaks to the depth of this roster. There is a ton of young talent that very well could break out in the 2024 year. That's partially why I'm a little bit more optimistic than a lot of other people across the country about this Florida Gators program. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Florida Gator fans. It's been a very exciting last couple of weeks with this program, breaking down the transfer portal commitments, and the amount of support you guys continue to show. It truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and much more importantly, let it fly in the comment section. There are a lot of players that I might be sleeping on heading into 2024. If you guys want to drop some of those players, drop your top 10s in the comment section as well. I learn a ton from you guys, but the best part about doing this is talking ball with you guys in the comment section. And without further ado, let's get into this one, and let's start with one of the reasons that I'm a little bit higher on the Florida Gators than a lot of other people across the country, and that is I think this offensive line is going to take a massive step in the right direction, and Brendan Crenshaw-Dickson is going to be a large reason why that happens. You take a look at him coming over from San Diego State, 343 pass per opportunities, only gave up 3 sacks, only gave up 6 quarterback hurries. And I think one thing that really intrigues me is played both left tackle and right tackle, and that versatility, the ability for him to play both of those positions at such a high level might be a massive factor with this Florida offensive line. You talk about why Florida struggled so much on the offensive line last year. I mean, it had a lot to do with the tackle play. They went into that 2023 season with not enough tackle depth, really guys like Damian George that should not be playing tackle at the SEC level. I think Brendan Crenshaw-Dickson, we talk about a guy like Devin Manuel, going to really help this Florida Gators offensive line heading into 2024. And if that offensive line does indeed take that step, this Florida offense can be extremely dangerous. I mean, Graham Mertz played exceptionally well in 2023 with one of the worst pass protecting offensive lines that you saw in the conference. What happens when we give Graham Mertz a little bit more time, a little bit of some more cleaner pockets? That's one reason to be fired up about the Florida Gators. And going to number 9, another offensive lineman, and an offensive lineman that I feel like just is flying under the radar, but was arguably the best offensive lineman for this Florida team in 2023. And that's center Jake Slaughter. And you take a look at the pass pro numbers, 330 pass pro opportunities, only gave up 2 sacks, only 5 quarterback hurries, graded out as the best run blocker for this Florida program. He's a phenomenal athlete that plays with really good pad levels, so he can deal with some of those bigger bodies on the inside of the defensive line. But that phenomenal athleticism really does allow him to get to the second level exceptionally well, picking up linebackers. And if you can get that run game going for Florida, led by a guy like Jake Slaughter at that center position, again, expecting to take a step in the right direction for this Florida offensive line. Going to number 8, and I'm going to go Kelby Collins, and this is a really interesting, like, where you want to rank Kelby Collins. I think 8 is relatively fair right now. Now, if there are some Florida fans in the comment section that want to argue that he's a top 5 player on this roster heading into 2024, I will certainly not be the one to push back on that. You guys know I've been a massive fan of Kelby Collins since he was coming out of high school, and I think that's another one of those guys that you kind of expect to take that massive step going into year 2. He was 3rd on the team in 15 quarterback hurries, had 10 run stops. And although the production in the box score wasn't necessarily extremely flashy, you saw the bones of a very special defensive lineman, a guy that can play on the inside, can play on the edge. You can move him all along that defensive line, the versatility, what he can do in the run game with the heavy hands. I think Kelby Collins was a guy that was really relied on just being a better athlete and more physical than guys trying to block him to win in 2023. What happens when he knows how to use that length, knows how to use the power in his hands a little bit better, kind of sharpens up that pass rush toolkit. again, I think a guy that can take a step in the right direction in 2024, going to number 7. And we're going to go to Montrell Johnson. And a lot of people like to look at this Florida running back room and say, it's going to take a step back, losing a guy like Trevor Etienne. I think a lot of Florida fans are saying, well, Montrell Johnson was our leading rusher in 2023, and he was phenomenal. You take a look at some of the numbers, over 800 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns. Also, was a really good pass catcher out of the backfield, 30 catches for 236 yards. Now, some of the numbers that I really was impressed with, 3.5 yards per carry after contact. Montrell Johnson is a bruising running back that deals with contact exceptionally well. And I think for Florida fans, I think you're most excited to see what Montrell Johnson can look like being a 20-plus carry a game kind of back, because he is a running back that probably gets better in the third and fourth quarters, wearing defenses down. He's a running back that if you're an opposing defense, you don't want to have to tackle 20, 25 times a game. And I think that's exactly how Billy Napier is going to use a guy like Montrell Johnson. You got some nice young running backs that we saw in the spring game in that running back room as well. Montrell Johnson maybe a little bit low, coming in at number 7, moving up to number 6. And we're going to go to the most recent transfer for the Florida Gators, Elijah Badger. And the Florida Gator fans who've been listening for the last couple of weeks and months know that not only am I a massive fan of Elijah Badger, but more importantly, I'm a massive fan of how Elijah Badger fits into this Florida Gators offense. You look at how Billy Napier has constructed this passing attack. It is predicated on getting the football out in space and letting these wide receivers operate after the catch. You look at Elijah Badger and say, 26 missed tackles forced in 2023. Those are some running back numbers with the football in his hands. 546 yards after the catch in 2023. You are largely looking at one of the better wide receivers after the catch in the country. And I said it when he committed. I'll say it again. I think Elijah Badger was probably an NFL wide receiver had he had better quarterback play the last 2 years at Arizona State. He's certainly going to have that in 2024 with Graham Mertz. I'm fired up about Elijah Badger and how he fits in to this Florida Gators offense, going to number 5. And another guy that he's coming in at 5 could be a top 3 player for this Florida Gators program. That is Shamar James. The flashes that you've seen from Shamar James are truly special, right? He's 54 tackles. That was second on this Florida Gators program in 2023. He missed the last 4 games due to injury. And I think the main concern you have if you're a Florida Gator fan, and you have 2 guys like this, Paul Howard, Shamar James, 2 of the more, in my mind, freakier linebackers that you see in the country. Now, how can we get these linebackers, one, more involved in this defense, playing downhill, being a little bit more, having a little bit more hands-on in terms of the outcome of the game, but I think more importantly, just the consistency, right? Down in, down out, game in, game out. Can these 2 linebackers and Shamar James and Pup Howard really put it together? You guys know I'm a massive fan of Coach Roberts coming in to coach these 2 young linebackers up. I am extremely optimistic about this linebacker room, because you talk about Shamar James and Pup Howard. You also have some phenomenal linebackers, Miles Graham, Aiden Childs, coming in as true freshmen. A lot of different ways you can allow these linebackers to have a massive impact on this Gators defense, going up to our number 4 player. And that's going to be Jason Marshall Jr. And there are a couple of different ways you want to talk about Jason Marshall Jr. And this might upset a lot of Florida Gator fans to have him as the 4th best player on this team. You go back to the 2023 film and say, he was really damn good. You take a look at some of the numbers, led the team with 10 pass breakups, had a 44.7% completion percentage when targeted. That is extremely low for a number 1 cornerback. Now, I think the big narrative around Jason Marshall Jr. is he gave up the big play too often, didn't come up with some plays that he probably should have made. And I think those are the plays that kind of stick with a lot of Florida Gator fans heading into 2024. But you kind of evaluate the aggregate season that Jason Marshall Jr. had. Did he necessarily reach his potential? Probably not. That's why he came back to Florida. We all know how talented this kid is. I think he played a lot better than a lot of Florida Gator fans probably appreciate, coming in at number 4. And I think what's most exciting is the sky's the limit. And if you can cut down on some of those big plays you give up in coverage, again, 25 yards per reception is far too high for a cornerback that has all American caliber traits. I think you could be looking at one of the better cornerbacks in the SEC going to number 2, and we're going to go to safety, Jordan Castell. Another guy that the Florida Gator fans who've been rocking with the fellas for the last couple of weeks and months, probably not surprised to see him at number 3. He was a true freshman last year. He led this team in tackles, had an interception, 3 pass breakups, but really what stands out to me, and you guys don't see this note because of the banner, we'll take that down. He's versatile. This is a guy that was used in so many different ways as a true freshman. I mean, Austin Armstrong put a ton on Jordan Castell's plate, and he was largely up for the task. This was a guy that could play that box safety role, could play as a nickel corner and hold up in man coverage, only missed 10.7% of his tackles. That is an exceptional number for a true freshman in the SEC. If Jordan Castell can build on what he did as a true freshman, in my mind, you're looking at one of the better safeties that you see not only in the SEC, but in the country, going up to number 2, and a guy that made a lot of people, including my brother, look very silly, quarterback Graham Mertz. There was so much slander on Graham Mertz's name heading into the 2023 season as a really talented quarterback coming out of high school, never really put it together at Wisconsin. I think you can blame a lot of that on how that offense was constructed around him. And what does he do in 2023 in the SEC? Throws for almost 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. It was top 5 in the country with a 73% completion percentage. And I think the big thing we're looking for not only Graham Mertz and Billy Napier for this Florida Gators offense is, hey, we now trust Graham Mertz as being one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. Let's treat him like that. And I don't think Florida necessarily treated Graham Mertz as a difference maker at the quarterback position in 2023. If they can do that in 2024, I think Graham Mertz could even take a step in the right direction. He's going to have a better offensive line. He's going to have better wide receivers. He's going to have, I think, year 2 in the system, which certainly is going to help. He had a 41% completion percentage when targeting 20-plus yards down the field. I think the problem with that is his average depth of target was only 6.7 yards. So can Billy Napier put a little bit more on Graham Mertz's plate, ask him to be that difference-making quarterback that I think we all know Graham Mertz can be? I think you might see him take a massive step in 2024 and build on what was already a very good season in 2023. And the number 1 player on this Florida Gators program, probably not a surprise to a lot of people, Eugene Wilson III. And again, we talked about Jordan Castell, Eugene Wilson, Kelby Collins. We could have talked about Bryce Thornton. We could have talked about Pup Howard. All these guys only going into year 2 of this Florida Gators team. You talk about Billy Napier kind of building a young nucleus to this roster. It starts with Eugene Wilson. Again, you talk about the fit in this Florida Gators offense. I mean, there's not a better guy in the country after the catch, right? 480 yards after the catch, 18 missed tackles forced, had 0 drops as a true freshman, an 86% completion percentage when targeted. And I think what's most exciting is you look at Eugene Wilson III and say, there's another reason that you can believe he takes a step. I think at last year, Florida kind of treated him as a true freshman, kind of a gadget guy at times. We're going to get you some swing passes, some screen passes, some end arounds. They didn't ask Eugene Wilson to really be a wide receiver to work vertically down the field. And I think we all know that he can be that kind of wide receiver. So what I'm most looking forward to is treating Eugene Wilson as a true difference maker at the wide receiver spot. And I'm not saying we don't give him screen passes and we don't give him touches out of the backfield, because again, he is one of the most dynamic playmakers in the country with the football in his hands, but treat him as a true wide receiver 1. And I think he might take another step heading into 2024 as well. And again, those are my top 10 to kind of emphasize it. Let's talk about some players that we left off the list, right? Joey Slackman coming over from Penn. I left him off the list because you kind of want to see the transition from the FCS to the SEC, but he's a guy that there was a reason every Power 5 team across the country was looking to add Joey Slackman to the roster. Cam Jackson was sneaky, very good for Florida, led them in run stops last year. We talked about Pup Howard. We talked about Bryce Thornton. You have a couple transfers in the back end, DJ Douglas, Asa Turner, Triquez Bridges, who certainly could be top 10 players as well. This list was difficult because there's a lot of guys that we expect to take that step heading in 2024. I would love to hear your top 10s in the comment section. And again, Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Y'all know I love talking this program. The support you show truly does mean a lot. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.